Hello, hello, hello. Good day, good day. And welcome everyone to our New Jersey Family Engagement Hub Lunch and Learn. And today's session is going to be on using school data to advocate for stronger family school partnerships. So thank you all for joining us today. And certainly, this is our team for our Family Engagement Hub. Please, would you introduce yourself in the chat? Tell us your name, where you are coming from, whether you are an educator or a parent or a community-based organization. We are so happy that you've joined us today. My name is Kim Rivers, and I am the Family Engagement Hub Training Coordinator. And then a little bit about SPAN for hopefully everyone knows who SPAN is, a parent organization. SPAN is our parent center. And you can go to our website at spanadvocacy.org and take a look at all of the wonderful programs that we offer, everything from early childhood, leadership development, juvenile justice. And then, of course, you're here for a Family Engagement Hub. So our hub is a resource for everyone in the state of New Jersey. We support families, educators, professionals, students, and communities. It's all about building and strengthening partnerships for family engagement. So now, please, I'd like to engage with you. I'd like you to utilize all of the reaction buttons that you have in the Zoom. And we are talking today about data. What is data? And I would like you to put into the chat what you think about when you hear the word data. Oh, good morning. Welcome, Tina and Noreen. Welcome. Okay, so when we think about data, we tend to think of maybe numbers, we think of graphs. It's like all the classic stuff, budgets, science research, maybe business charts. So data is really about all those different things that measure, right? So it could be numbers and graphs. As you can see that graph there, it could be our digital footprints. Yeah, that's also data. So as we know in the world that we are in with social media posting, text messages, those online photos, even all of the Google searches that we do is data and it's tracked. So even when we look online and try to find out information, every step that we take is tracked online. Our phones, our smart devices, even checking the weather. The weather is all about data. But of course, it's not just about math and numbers or spreadsheets. Today, data is much bigger. It's a digital footprint of everything that we do. Yes, it includes traditional stuff like financial reports, but includes every photo you post, every song that you stream, every text that you send. And on top of that, our devices are constantly creating invisible data in the background, like your watch tracking your heart rate to make sure that you are doing well. So, data is a digital mirror of our daily lives. So data is essentially life. It's everything that we do. Every decision about what we have around us is determined by data. Everything from where to live. We're trying to figure out where you want to live. You want to look at the city planning. You want to look at the demographics. You're thinking about what to study, where to eat. We go online and we look at the restaurant ratings and see what people have put in it. People hear data, and it's the journey that we have. And when it comes to school, when it comes to education, data is really determining everything that takes place at school. So it is human life translated into a language that systems can understand. When we look at a spreadsheet, we aren't looking at just cells and rows. We're looking at the heartbeat of our community. It is like the architect of everything that creates the reality of our children's experience at school. So I'd like you to put into the chat, why do you think data is important? How does an understanding of school data impact how you show up? For example, at PTA meetings, or parent-teacher night, or even Board of Education meetings. How does data impact how you are showing up at school? Yes, Erica, it helps guide decisions. Absolutely. So it's representation. Yes. Yes. So people need to be able to communicate. Data impact decision making, drives avenues to support students' needs. Thank you, Lakeisha. And Suzanne says data represents the influence in someone's life. Data is all about the language that we use. It's how we frame those conversations about what matters, right? And it really can create a mindset shift, because if we approach data from a deficit perspective, when we're pointing out what is wrong or what kids can't do, we're looking at all the failures. But that can sometimes make families shut down. So what we want to look at is in a different way, with an asset-based mindset. We want to look at what's possible. So we want to focus on strengths and on growth. What naturally gives families confidence and the power to engage and to partner with their districts. It's at the end of the day about an invitation to bring families to the table. So we want to stop using data to report on what's wrong, and instead use it as a tool to problem solve with families, with communities, with educators, and make sure that families are co-experts, that you have a seat at the table with what is happening within your child's school. So the Department of Education has a lot of great information on their website. It has all of the data sources that you can use to find out what is happening in your individual school, what is happening statewide, everything from the New Jersey School Performance Reports, SPRs. It has the Department of Education data portal. It has the ESSA accountability profiles. That's Every Student Succeeds Act. It has a special education indicator data information. And let's go through those tools, because we want for you to be able to go and research, find out what is driving those decisions around education, whether it's school size, whether it's school lunch, whether it's the funding, whatever you need to know about how you can apply your understanding of data to advocate and work with your school. So starting with the New Jersey School Performance Reports. This is a comprehensive diagnostic tool. And under the guidelines, the state uses the data in the performance reports to see which schools are thriving and which schools need more funding and more support. So it's about creating transparency and ensuring that every student, regardless of where they live, that they're getting what they need. So, for example, they research and show information about academic achievement versus growth. This is where you're looking at what is happening within that school, that accountability with those performance reports, where they identify the schools needed. They show the academic achievement, the proficiency, whether they are having high levels or low levels in English language arts, mathematics, science. What are the results? What are the averages? What are they seeing? Student growth, measuring the progress over time so that they can see where they were last year and what they need to work on this year. So a school might have low proficiency, but they may have incredible growth, meaning that the teachers are doing a lot of heavy lifting to move their students forward. There's also information about chronic absenteeism. And as we know, chronically absent mean that you are missing 10% or more of the school year. And that is a huge factor that's impacting not just New Jersey, but schools nationwide. In fact, I saw it on the news just this morning. They were talking about the levels of chronic absenteeism. And it tends to be a major red flag in the reporting because if the student's not in the building, then they're not able to learn. So that data really helps us understand where our kids are at. And then, of course, information on college and career readiness. What's happening with the SAT levels and ACT, what those scores are. Are our kids ready to move forward to graduation? Are they taking the rigorous AP courses? The data helps us bridge the gap between high school and graduation and whether they're going to have a successful career or college experience. And then, of course, climate, the student to teacher ratios, the levels of staff that are present, and the school-wide safety data. All that information is sitting on the New Jersey School Performance Reports. And then the Department of Education Data Portal. So this has all of the education data, has all the historical archives. It really does a raw information that's showing the pattern of what's happened and shows the benchmarks and compares the district and state, whether you can pull out district numbers and put them right next to state averages, or even the districts to see exactly where we stand within the landscape. And of course, it has the long-term trend data. So this allows us to look at the long view, tracking things like enrollment shifts or graduation rates over a 5-year or a 10-year period. And then, of course, it has downloads where you can really look at the numbers and export the data into an Excel. And of course, this is used very often by administrators who want to create their own custom charts or create internal board presentations. And of course, I put this here so you can see what's actually on that ESSA portal. So this is actually a snapshot of what they have on it. It's so much information, school and student information, performance data, finance and budget data, staff data, school climate, discipline, health. So if you are really looking to get equipped with information about what is happening in your school or district, that's a really great place for you to get a sense of how to advocate and what's happening with your children. And then we have the ESSA accountability profiles. So the profiles are federal health compliance labels. It has all the data. Schools are given designations like CSI, which is Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or TSI, which is Targeted Support and Improvement, based upon their performance. And it helps the state determine where they need more intensive support and additional resources. And then there's a subgroup performance tracking where they're looking at the school equities. So they're breaking it down by numbers, students with disabilities, English language learners. They're trying to make sure that there are no students that are going to be overlooked. And then there's weighting indicators. And this is important to understand that not every metric counts the same. So this profile shows you exactly how much weight the state puts on, for example, raw test scores versus student growth or graduation rates. It gives a formula for how that school is being assessed. And then finally, target setting. So this tool is used not just to figure out what's happening from the past, but it creates a roadmap for the future. It lists specific and incremental targets that you can expect to hit every year. And it takes the guesswork out of what success looks like in the eyes of the state and feds. And when you're looking at ESSA, they utilize 5 core indicators. They focus on academic achievement. So this is where looking at ELA proficiency or math. And the academic achievement makes up about 30% of a school's overall score. And of course, the goal is 100% proficiency for every student group, but the state really has all of this information so that you can see the targets for each year. If a school misses its target one year, the state actually recalculates and bumps up the target for the remaining years so that they can really set their goals. And then academic progress. So this is a big deal. It counts for 40% of the score. So instead of just looking at a single test score, this metric tracks how much individual growth a student made from one year to the next compared to other kids who started at the same level. So the growth is customized to where a student starts. And then, of course, a big indicator is graduation rates. So when you look at high schools, graduation rates are a growth metric. It takes up 40% of the score, and the state has expectations. Of course, the long-term goals are 95% graduation rate for a 4-year track, or 96% for a 5-year track, or 97% for a 6-year track. So the plan would be to close that gap. And really, just like test scores, this target will automatically adjust upward if the school falls behind the year before. And then English language proficiency. So this 4th indicator tracks how well our multilingual learners are progressing towards mastering English. And the state has goals. They want it to be at least at 34.6% for all multilingual learners to hit their growth targets. And then last but not least, school quality or school success. So this indicator looks at the overall school environment, and this is beyond just test scores. This focuses on chronic absenteeism. And of course, it adds a new metric as well called high school persistence. So it's weighted where the school gathers data and tracks percentages of students who either graduate within the 6 years or are still actively enrolled and trying to finish. And then, of course, we cannot talk about data without talking about special education indicator data. And that link is going to go into the chat. But certainly, we're talking about these 17 federal indicators with metrics to ensure that the policy around special education is being followed and that free, appropriate public education is being given to all students. So that's the state performance plan. And then LRE, least restrictive environment. This is another big focus. And this is looking at how much time our students spend with their non-disabled peers. So that's really important data because the goal is to maximize inclusion. And the data tells us if we are successfully keeping students in their least restrictive environment possible. And then data on transition and post-school outcomes for our special needs population. This is super important because it tracks what happens to our students after they graduate. Are our special needs adults able to get jobs? Are they going to college? This tells us if the programming is actually preparing them for the real world. And then there's data on disproportionality. So this acts as a safeguard for equity. We use this data to check and see if there's been an over-identification within certain race or ethnic groups for special education or even discipline. So this is a really important tool for identifying and correcting any kind of biases within the systems. And of course, with special education, data on an individual level with IEPs, individualized education programs, that is what determines your child's entire IEP. So if you have an IEP, do know that the testing that they do every 3 years, that is critical to creating the content of the IEP. So those assessments, that data is what determines eligibility. They're not just random scores. They're the facts and the science that shows whether or not the student is determined eligible for special ed. And of course, the content of the IEP, how many minutes of ELA, how many minutes of math, how many related services minutes you have for speech or occupational therapy or physical therapy. The data is what builds and directs that content. Even something like behavior. Having a log, they create data by doing observations of kids over maybe 3 weeks or so, but they observe them and they collect data in order to identify what might be triggering that behavior. And then they create what's called a functional behavioral assessment. And that log uses that data to try to identify triggers and then create a behavior plan for students. So data is super important for our special needs IEPs. So making sense of data. We have to understand the impact of data. So the goal is look past spreadsheets and look at the trends, look at the differences, read the tables, read the charts. The reports may seem intimidating, but you want to really break down the basics and develop that skill. It might, initially be difficult, just like it is, when we start any new thing, but get yourself comfortable with tables and graphs so that you can start understanding how to spot growth scores. Connect that data to real life. Show us, for example, why attendance may be down. It might be because there are issues happening within that community with the ability to get food or get clothing. That data can really inform what is happening in that school. And of course, recognizing patterns. So there's indicators. When you look at a school, don't look at the test scores in a vacuum. You have to connect how the different pieces of data connect to one another. So school attendance drops, look and see if the behavior referrals go up and whether the grades are going down. So tracking those patterns together helps us to see the whole picture of how that school environment is affecting our kids. Special education trends. Look at the data for students with disabilities. Look at how the school shares its resources. For example, how many students are being placed within one classroom and whether those students are able to make real academic progress from year to year. The data tells us whether they are getting the support that they need. And then, yes, disproportionality and equity, looking at the data for patterns, checking to see if certain groups of students are being suspended more than others or left out of advanced classes compared to everyone else. You can see that on a chart. See if there's some kind of imbalance. So then you have something to advocate with. Because there's, on one hand, growth, and the other hand, proficiency. And it often can get confused. So proficiency is like a snapshot in time. Did this student pass this test on a specific date? But growth, on the other hand, tells the real story. So even though a student might be scoring below grade level, their growth score might be high over a period of time. So they may actually be making massive gains compared to where they were a year ago or 2 years ago. So at the end of the day, all of this data can then impact funding. And that's huge. How money is being spent. So when you see a literacy growth has plateaued for a specific group, then maybe there needs to be more resources and funding or specialized staff trained in reading or comprehension to really support that particular classroom or school. So how do we use data to advocate? How do we turn that information into action? Well, number one, do the research. Go online at the different websites. Look at the information. And as you may know as parents, often things can be really overwhelming until it relates to you directly. So look up the information that's impacting your child or your school. And then you gotta use your voice. Speak up. Utilize communication, whether it's emails, whether it's phone calls, whether it's showing up to meetings. Advocating for our kids means walking into that school meeting and communicating, but the data is what gives you that confidence, that foundation to be able to speak from a place of knowledge, to be able to refer to the ESSA portal, to the scores, to even bring the graph. Use that data so that you can be taken more seriously. And then connect the data to policy. You got to connect the numbers to actual school policies. For example, if there's a big drop in the math scores, you need to look at the math curriculum and maybe ask if it's actually working for all students. And then support family engagement. So use the data to get better resources for everyone within the school community. When you show up to the school board meetings and you discuss student growth and what's happening in terms of what the families are given, what are they sharing with families within your school? What do you need? Where are the deficits? Where are there lower scores? Or where, according to the data, is there a sudden drop? Is there something that shifted this year? Can we identify what we can do to work together to make our student success better? So yes, research the history. Before you take action, do your homework. Look at the history of the issues in your district. It helps you figure out whether the problem at hand is brand new or whether it's a long-term trend that maybe isn't getting better. And if things are not getting better, then maybe we need to work together to do something different. Find best practices. And that's a huge thing about data, where there are actual websites, whatworks.org, for example, where they gather, and I'm going to put that into the chat, whatworks.org. They gather information, scientific evaluations, assessments, and they put that data on that website so you can see what works. And here at SPAN, I've worked at SPAN talking with families over the years, and I always talk about the fact that at the end of the day, we are always trying to figure out what works. And identifying what works is about data. So when we talk about the term best practices, it's really about what has worked for this community in this state. Why are their test scores so high? Why are they having such success with turning around chronic absenteeism, for example? So researching what has worked for various communities, identifying best practices is how you can really then find some helpful strategies or techniques or implementation so that you can fix issues happening at your school and have proven ideas that you can bring to the table instead of just pointing out what's not working. And I know that it's an easy thing to do to say, well, we have this problem, you have this problem, you have this problem. But bring solutions. Try to identify solutions to bring to the table. It actually makes for a much better conversation because when we walk into a room and we are bringing the negative only, it doesn't help people open up, right? So we really want to walk in with solutions. So identifying best practices, bringing solutions, bringing options to the table is a really great way for you to partner and engage in a positive way. And then plan for your meetings. And this is for any meeting you have. Walk into the meeting with numbers. Have your solutions ready. Have an agenda. Whether you're sitting face to face with a principal or going to a school board meeting, if you come in with historical data and real solutions, it can really change the dynamic of the room. And then, of course, writing your message down. So turn all that research into a statement. So instead of saying, well, I'm really worried about reading, you can say, well, over the last 3 years, our reading scores have dropped, that growth has dropped. But there are other districts who have fixed this successfully by utilizing this specific program. Can our budget support implementing this practice here? So that's a real way for us to use the information available and implement it when we are advocating with our school districts. Because at the end of the day, what we do and what we are all about is about family engagement. And certainly, data, the public access to data, is your legal right. So you have the right to know everything about your school district, your state, whether it's school performance, student growth, all of those metrics are available and accessible to you. But you have to use it. And the data only becomes possible when you implement it. So turn those numbers into real world results. And when families, when community members, when you work together, you can really take those statistics and come to the table. Have a seat at the table. Be a part of that decision making. Take it to your local school boards, your PTA meetings, classrooms, because you want to stay informed and engaged. Because at core, family engagement is built on fundamental tenets: trust, equity, and partnership. And school data can be a bridge that connects all of it. That school data can help you build trust. So when schools share information, when there's transparency around data about student progress, district progress, it removes all the guesswork and it fosters and builds that mutual respect. Data drives equity. So when that data exposes gaps, it can ensure that resources and supports are directed to students and families who need them most. And then data powers partnership. So instead of guessing how to help, that data can give a clear language and message about how to collaborate on equal footing. So it's not just a collection of numbers. Data is the tool that can transform parents and families from passive observers into active co-authors, co-collaborators with your school districts. So now I'm going to tell you about our upcoming offerings. Tomorrow night, we're going to have Many Roads, One Future, and this is for high schoolers. So this is a webinar that we did last week, but this one is specifically targeting high schoolers. Yes, everyone is welcome, families, educators, community members. It's going to be at 6:30 p.m. But this is really giving students information about all the different options that they have when they are graduating high school, whether they're going to college, whether they're going to trade school, whether they're going to employment. It really helps them understand that landscape and removes the stress about what they're going to do next. So that's tomorrow, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. If you know a high schooler, even middle schoolers, this is important too because it starts then, right? Please, please share with your networks and show up. And then on Monday, June 1st, Patterson Education Fund is doing an offering on the college track where they're really going to focus on all the different resources to help families and students as they try to line up what those plans are for college. And then our next webinar for June is going to be Skill Up the Summer. And that one is going to have a lot of great information about activities that you can do with your kids throughout the summer and beyond. So please join us for that next offering. I know I don't see it here, but we are going to have a lunch and learn for June. It's going to be given again by Patterson Education Fund. And it really kind of ties in with what we just did because it's going to be called Understanding the School Budget. And that's going to be how to use that data and put it into funding and how you can advocate with policies around how your school budget is being utilized. And so I thank you all for joining us today. Please, please fill out our survey. The link is going to be in the chat, or you can use your phone and use the QR code. We appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us for our other wonderful offerings, our lunch and learns, or our monthly webinars. And of course, you can go onto our website at njfe.org, njfehub.org, and subscribe to our newsletter or go to our YouTube channel as well. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.